couple things I wanted to address real quick. Jeremiah 15:16 is asking about Matthew 12:5, about why did Yeshua tell the Pharisees that the priests break the Sabbath yet are not guilty? In Jeremiah 15:16, respectfully, I'm rewording what you're asking because what you asked is not the actual scripture. So I'm going to actually go to the scripture so that people aren't confused, because this is where we get into all types of misunderstandings and arguments, is when we ask a question about scripture, but it's not the actual scripture. It's being misquoted. So let's actually go and look at the actual verses so that people are not confused about this. And this is Jesus, whom is responding in rebuttal to the Pharisees. The Pharisees are trying to trap him, trying to see that he broke Sabbath, but actually he didn't break Sabbath. He actually just broke the Pharisaical oral law, which they had made up. So he's basically just going against their traditions, and they don't like him for it. So here in verse 5, he's schooling them on the actual law, which they're not keeping. And he says, or have you not read in the law that on the Sabbath, the priests in the temple break the Sabbath and are innocent? But I say to you that something greater than the temple is here. So the idea is what he's talking about, the priests in the temple, that was their job. Remember, the Levites, including the sons of Aaron, who become the high priesthood, they were given that allotment in the Torah, in the covenant, their portion. Since they didn't get any land, they were actually, in Leviticus 8, they're actually brought to the Lord as his portion out of all the tribes of Israel. And so therefore, the other tribes' tithes and offerings would go to supply the needs of the Levites. This is how they got their food and their ideas, but they also had the cities that were given to them inside of the actual geographical boundaries of inherited land given to the other tribes. So the point is, they got, quote unquote, less of a physical inheritance, but more of a greater authority inheritance in the Father's system that he had set up, which was the priesthood. As a result of the way that system works, is that they worked in the temple and ministered to the Lord, both the Levites helping the high priests, being the sons of Aaron, to do their functions all together as a system to facilitate the tithes and offerings and the sacrifices brought to them by the other tribes. So as a result of that, they're doing their job on the Sabbath, technically, right? But because they're doing good, they're ministering the law of God, which is perfect and holy and spiritual, as Romans 12:12-14 tells us. They're not breaking the Sabbath in the command. They're not breaking the Sabbath in the context that the Pharisees are accusing Yeshua of breaking the Sabbath. They're just going against the normal order for everybody, because from the get-go, the priesthood was already put into a special category that they would be the ones to do the business of the Sabbath. Like the things that had to be done on the Sabbath for the feast days that we read about from the law of God, they were the ones appointed to do that. So technically they're breaking the Sabbath, meaning they're doing what actually, brought them their livelihood, which was to facilitate the offerings that were brought to the temple. But yet they're not breaking it because of disregard. They're not breaking it out of disrespect. They're not breaking it because they are not wanting to be in covenant after they already said they wanted to be in covenant, right? So they're not being a turncoat. They're not breaking it in an evil or negative way. They're literally just, quote unquote, breaking it as a result of the function the Father told them they needed to be doing on that day, which is exactly what the angels do on the Sabbath in heaven above. In their priesthood, they keep the Sabbath, but then there's certain ones of them that are allotted to do priestly duties in the heavenly tabernacle above, just like Yeshua, who's a high priest in the Melchizedek priesthood, is in the heavenly tabernacle above doing his duties. So that means on Sabbath days, he's overseeing sacrifices done in the heavenly tabernacle. That means on the Day of Atonement, he's stepping up as the main guy to step before the Father and make atonement for all the sins of Israel, both conscious and unconscious. He's the one that's doing actual, quote unquote, work that's appointed to him on Holy Convocation, Sabbath, feast days. So he's not breaking it either, and he's doing these things in heaven. So again, the context is about Yeshua reprimanding the Pharisees for a moment where they're trying to entrap him, because again, like always, the enemy tries to redefine these words to entrap you or to confuse you or to get you off the path. And that's what Yeshua is having to clarify here.
Yeah, the reality is they were working for the Lord. He's their employer. Yeah. So if your employer, is literally the Father, you're doing good on the Sabbath, so it's kind of hard to break Shabbat when he's the one, employing you. Okay, do we want to, we need to finish reading that passage.
We need to finish Jubilees chapter 50. I'm getting back to it. So verse 10, for great is the honor which the Lord has given to Israel, that they should eat and drink and be satisfied on this festival day, and rest thereon from all labor which belongs to labor of the children of men, except for burning frankincense and bringing oblations and sacrifices before the Lord for days and for Sabbaths. This is what Jeremiah 15:16's question was earlier about the priests, right? They actually have a job to do on that day. Verse 11, this work alone shall be done on the Sabbath days in the sanctuary of the Lord your God, that they may atone for Israel. So what's Yeshua doing in Matthew 12:5? He's referencing Jubilees 50:11, which the Pharisees wanted to ignore. But if they had just read this verse right here, he would have said, or have you not read in the law that the priests break the Sabbath? It's being talked about literally right here, verse 11. This work alone shall be done on the Sabbath days in the sanctuary of the Lord. That's where the priests would work, that they may atone for Israel with sacrifice continually from day to day for memorial well-pleasing before the Lord. Guys, what do you think happens in heaven above, in the tabernacle in heaven above? God doesn't keep a different set of rules in heaven. He keeps the same rules he gave for mankind to practice on the earth. He keeps them in heaven. God does not change. He is unchanging. And his son, Yeshua, is the same yesterday, today, and forever. It's the same concept. He's a faithful priest who's constantly doing his priestly duty in the heavenly tabernacle above with the angelic priesthood, which is why, anyway, I can't go into it again. I've done so many videos on this, but this is why the priesthood is one of our fundamental branches on the context tree. If you don't understand the priesthood, put down the book of Hebrews, put down the New Testament, go back and learn Leviticus and Numbers in great depth, and the book of Jubilees, honestly.